Good day. I'm Alan Caseman from Aspire Literacy, and as a follow-up to my first video about what is dyslexia, I thought we could go through some of the effects of dyslexia and what it's like to be a student with dyslexia in a classroom. So, firstly, on the first slide here is what I like to put in some of my classrooms when I'm teaching students with dyslexia. Is basically an outline of what the lesson is going to entail. Therefore, the student knows exactly what's going to happen, and they're not feeling anxious about what they might be doing in class that day. So we're going to look at a few famous people and what they might have in common. We're going to look at defining dyslexia, doing a reading simulation and a writing simulation with some strategies before closing off. So, what do these people have in common? I'm sure you might say, oh, Alan, they have dyslexia. And you would be correct in saying that. However, think about what they might also have in common. I think I'm cutting off Whoopi's face here, but that's Whoopi Goldberg. All right, so you might have thought about such things as they are innovative people, very creative, also in the top of their fields, and they haven't let the condition known as dyslexia affect or impede them in their success. You might recognize such faces as Harry Belafonte, Richard Branson, and a few more famous people, one more from Jamaica. But this is just something for us to consider about dyslexia. It doesn't have to impact your success, and many people strive above it. A little bit about me. So as I said, I'm Alan Caseman. I'm a member of the British Dyslexia Association. I hold an AMDA certificate, which allows me to teach and assess learners with the specific learning difficulty dyslexia. So contact me if you need to about how to assess learners and diagnose with dyslexia. And you can follow me on Aspire Literacy at Instagram to get some more tips about how to best help and support our students with dyslexia and other learning difficulties. So the website also is www.aspireliteracyja.com. Luckily for us, there's been a new definition of dyslexia. That only came out, I think, last week in March. I think the last week of February, I should say. So a new Delphi definition of dyslexia is now endorsed by the BDA, and that is that dyslexia is a set of processing difficulties that affect the acquisition of reading and spelling. The most commonly observed cognitive impairment in dyslexia is a difficulty in phonological processing. That is phonological awareness, phonological processing speed, or phonological memory. However, phonological difficulties do not fully explain the variability that is observed. There might be such things as working memory, processing speed, and orthographic skills that contribute to the impact of dyslexia. So, looking back at our last definition in the last video I made, there's been an update that is a bit more clear in what dyslexia is, highlighting phonological processing as a major and the most commonly observed impairment. However, that is not to say that phonological difficulties fully explain the range of difficulties observed. So it's a common feature, but is not the only feature. Okay. So, recalling that children with dyslexia often have a hard time working with letter sounds, and that is the basis of the phonological problems we just discussed. Okay, so can they put together k, a, t to form the word cat in their minds, or do they mistake the sounds and symbols when they read them and when they write them as well? So, phonemes, the reason is phonemes are the building blocks of language. They're represented by the letters of the alphabet, and these are the component sounds of these spoken words. So, most people automatically hear the word goat is made up of three sounds: g, o, t. G, o, t, I should say. Reading requires the ability to map these phonemes onto letters on a page. But what happens when this basic skill called decoding doesn't come automatically? Imagine you are a student struggling to sound out every word because you can't distinguish among these phonemes. I'm going to show you a slide next, and I want you to take a few moments to familiarize yourself with the phoneme translation key. Then you're going to try to read the passage that follows. You'll be answering some comprehension questions too. So feel free to pause the video, take some time to study these slides, and discuss these things with your colleagues, or if you're a parent, with other parents, before moving on. So the passages below. Imagine you're a student who has to decode this passage, which is only about 3 paragraphs. I imagine many students who have dyslexia have to read whole pages, whole chapters of books when they have this difficulty breaking down the phoneme sounds. Imagine they have to concentrate and focus and try to translate each sound into its proper, each letter, I should say, into its proper sound. So where you see Q, for example, pronounced as D or T, Z pronounced as M, P pronounced as B, B pronounced as P, YS, ER, A as in bat, as in E, pronounce it as E as in pet, E as in pet, pronounced as A as in bat. So this is just some of the mental gymnastics a young learner who is struggling to decode letters and sounds might have to go through. So for example, the P here should be B. So they might say to themselves, okay, I need to remember that this B is actually a B sound and not a P. So we begin so spend some time trying to translate that. Have a pause. I've done this with some colleagues at my school, and they had some very interesting thoughts. We'll share them at the end about how they felt trying to translate this short passage. Okay, so you've paused, you've tried to translate as best as you can, and you think you understand what the passage is about. Now, myself, I'm taking the role of a teacher. I'm asking you 3 questions based on that passage. How many cells does a human body have? You might have found that a body has 100 trillion cells. Is the DNA code in each cell different or the same? You might have said the DNA code in each cell is the same. And the third question, is every cell in the body the same? Why not? No, the cell in the intestines were the same as the cells in the brain. They would not function properly as their roles are different if the cells in the intestines were the same as the cells in the brain. So having gone through trying to decode that passage, a young learner now has to try to comprehend that passage. So you can imagine the kind of strain that they might have. But I would actually prefer if you pause the paragraph, the passage before, and just kind of work through it yourself to discover that. So here's the translation. It's an excerpt from the Journey into the DNA, and yeah, you might have successfully translated it, but I'd like to know, maybe in the comment section, how long it took you to actually translate that task, and would you allow your students enough time to translate it, um, considering that they are dyslexic. So, some questions to ponder. What was challenging about reading that passage, even with the key? How did you feel while trying to make sense of the text? What strategies did you use to try to understand the passage? How did the key help and how did it not? A very important point here is that there are 44 phonemes in the English language. The exercise only presented difficulties with 8. So just to reiterate, going back here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we had 8 pronunciations that could have been made for 7 letters. So considering that there are 44 phonemes in the English language, and that was only a struggle with 8, now again imagine how difficult it might be for a dyslexic student who might struggle with more phonemes than the 8 that were there just a second ago. That is something for us as learners, as teachers I should say, to consider for our learners and our dyslexic learners most importantly. So, as mentioned before, dyslexia is a neurological problem that affects the brain's processing, retrieval, and creation of language, written language. As with reading, students with dyslexia spend so much time and effort writing the words, start to lose meaning, and it becomes a time-consuming, frustrating task. So we've just looked at decoding a passage. Now we need to think about encoding. Now, just to summarize this statement here, it's just basically saying that the same amount of mental and cognitive strength needed to read a passage, a student now has to do the same thing in terms of writing. So they now need to create written language. They now need to think about what sounds and words they're going to put down, what letter sounds. So, for example, this image suggests that a student might think of the word, and to them it might come out as morb, because of sound phonological problems or letter reversals, or the way the letters might be shaped are quite similar. The W turns over to the M and the D reverses to the B. So there's all letter sounds and letter memories and word memories that they have to think about that can become muddled. So what I'm going to get you to do now is try an encoding writing activity. However, I'm assuming that most of the people viewing this video are quite able and maybe might not have dyslexia or the literacy difficulties. So we're going to try a simulation where instead of writing with your dominant hand, you're going to write with your opposite dominant hand. And that opposite dominant hand, by using that to write, it will show you the kind of cognitive focus needed for our learners who have dyslexia and literacy difficulties that they have to use to write. So what I'll do is I'll give you 3 sentences, and I just want you to take the time to write them down. We're not going to pause for this one, you're just going to write as I say the sentences. Okay, so the first sentence, I should grab a pen. The first sentence is Bill went to the shop. That's Bill went to the shop. So you're writing, if I'm right-handed, I would write with my left hand. I'm going to try this out as well. Okay, took some thinking, but I think I've managed that. The next sentence is Kate bought milk, eggs, and a bread. So remember, if you're right-handed, write with your left hand. If you're left-handed, write with your right hand. The next sentence although the bird was caged, it still sang happily. Although the bird was caged, it still sang happily. Okay, so that is the amount of time you have for that. So some questions. How did you do? How did you feel about the process? And how could I have helped you perform better? So me personally, I didn't do too well. I won't show this to you, but it took me a little while to even finish the first sentence. And I found it tiring. I don't know about you, but I was a bit tired trying that. My mind was like really focused. My brain was really focused. Another thing is, I think, yeah, the process was a bit difficult as well as tiring. Now, when I try this with some schools, when I do this with some schools, the statements I get about how could I have helped, many teachers say I could have put the sentences on the whiteboard. I could have put the sentences in a PowerPoint because that would have helped them remember what to write down because they're thinking about how to remember the sentence while using their opposite hand, and that can be quite hard. And that's something for us to think about for our dyslexic learners as well. Are we expecting them to copy notes that we verbally give them? Or are we putting it on the board so they can see it and copy it down there? Another thing we must think about is how much are we getting them to copy off the board? Did I give you enough time to write those 3 sentences? I don't think I did. So many of you might have paused. You might have been cursing me under your breaths, like, why is this man not giving me enough time to write these sentences down? But I just wanted you to get the experience of what many learners might go through. Maybe thinking to themselves, wow, I wish Sir had given me a little bit more time to copy down that sentence because it's taking me a bit longer because I am working with a different cognitive process which might not be as fast as other learners in the classroom. So it's just something for us to think about there. I hope these 2 simulations really helped us consider what reading and writing is like for our dyslexic learners. I know I spend a lot of time discussing the difficulties learners have with dyslexia. However, there are some positives, and we must try to engage these positives and use them in our classrooms to promote learning. So, it's generally said that people with dyslexia often have strengths in creativity and higher level thinking processes. Um, they might consider more abstract ideas that other learners might not be able to see. So, recent research has indicated that dyslexic individuals showed notable strengths in nonverbal activity, and that could include sports as well, music, arts, crafts, across different ages and grades. The study found that intelligence and literacy skills had little to no effect on creativity levels in these students, and that children with dyslexia showed advantages in some, but not all aspects of creativity. So we must try to engage the creative aspects of our learners and use that in our classrooms as well to promote literacy, to promote the love of reading. Because imagine if you found some of these tasks so difficult, you might get a better understanding of why a child in your class or your own child who might be struggling with this difficulty might not ever want to pick up a book, because of the mental, um, you know, taxation that it gives, and probably because of how discouraging and demoralizing they might find the task. So we must remember to try to include something that they're able to do, some level of achievement that they're able to get from the reading, so they can walk away feeling that they're not failing, in essence. So on the other slide, I have a few strategies that can be used in classrooms. I would love for teachers or parents or anyone else involved in education to read through these strategies and think about what they already do. So you already do these things, you can think, wow, I do that. Oftentimes we do these seminars and we have to try to remember that we do these things sometimes, but we don't really know what they're called. We just do them automatically, and we didn't really know that we were doing them for the advantage of our, learners with difficulties or learning differences. So it's good for us to give ourselves a pat on the back for things that we do. Now we need to consider what we would like to do more of. So that's the next step, is what do we do already and what do we need to do more of? So a few strategies include pre-teaching the vocabulary and unfamiliar ideas. So before reading a book, we might introduce the topic, have students discuss it, where they've seen it before, how they've seen it. For example, a keyword might be resilience. They might think, what is resilience? How have you seen it before? So when they read the text, they understand the idea and the theme and the vocabulary. So we try to exempt students with dyslexia from reading out loud in class. This is due to words likely being misread or skipped. We're trying to alleviate any embarrassment or anxiety from the lesson for these learners, as best as we can, to make it a comfortable environment so they feel a part of the class and ready to learn and not anxious. Number 4 might be a bit obscure here, but we need to make sure that tasks are in manageable chunks. So recall how difficult some of these tasks were that we did earlier. If we were to put them into smaller segments and given ample time, a student might be able to complete them before moving on to the next, feeling smaller sense of achievement rather than one whole big obstacle that they have to face. So manageable chunks, short paragraph comprehension tasks, short paragraph reading tasks, small sections of writing rather than whole essays in one go. And this might be controversial, but we must expect less written work. person with dyslexia may be verbally bright and able to speak quite eloquently and in detail about their thoughts about a character, about a setting, about anything. However, when it comes to writing, because of the mental processing difficulties we witnessed earlier, and decoding and encoding, they will definitely need more time to write, more time for reading, more time for understanding, which could limit the time they have to write. Prepare a printout of tasks or homework and stick it into their books. So provide numbered steps. 1, do this. Number 2, do that. Dyslexic students often struggle with processing and organizing information. Numbered steps can simplify complex tasks into manageable parts, making it easier for them to focus on one step at a time. So this is similar to manageable chunks, similar to getting a student able to remember each step that they're supposed to do. Yes, numbered steps are essential. Do not ask them to copy text from a board or book. So going back to printing out tasks, again, lots of writing will have a definite impact on focus and concentration, and we're trying to alleviate as much mental stress and mental gymnastics as possible. So giving them a printout and suggesting the key areas you could highlight or draw pictures, they could actually do that to represent the most important points, rather than to get them to copy things from the board all day, every day. I feel like I missed something out. Make lessons more multisensory. That's the most important one for me. And I think the multisensory part of it really engages the creativity of the learners. So tasks that include movement, touch, sound, smells, even taste can engage different parts of the brain and make lessons more interesting. Puzzles, word searches, crossword puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, things that include some aspect of creativity. Even art can be included in English to make it more interesting. So students could draw vocabulary in ways that will help them to remember it colorfully. That could be something that goes into their vocabulary books. Just something that will engage different parts of the brain to help with the memory of the vocabulary or the phonological sounds. Everything matters here in terms of engaging different parts of the brain. And going back to that kind of creativity, we could try to create graphic organizers, that is, visual tools that represent information in a structured format, such as charts, diagrams, or maps. And I see students who love creating their own graphic organizers, because, as I said before, it engages that creativity, that kind of hands-on nature, where it's not just about them writing a whole paragraph or reading a whole paragraph. They're actually creating some images that might help them remember, diagrams, things like that, maps. They're really, really useful in terms of the memory skills that they need, as well as linking to their creativity skills. So just 8 things teachers could focus on and might be focusing on already. And just for you to think about which ones you do and which ones you need to do more of. Again, feel free to make some comments in the comment section about that. And also, in addition to that, you can tell us one thing you already knew about dyslexia and something you found out today. So it's been a pleasure talking to you about dyslexia and putting you into the shoes of a dyslexic learner so you can understand what they go through. And in that understanding, we aim to better support our vulnerable learners. Please smash that like button, I should say. Follow, subscribe, join us on Instagram for more tips and guidelines on how to support dyslexia. I'll also be putting out some resources, some free resources there. But yes, looking forward to the next talk. Let me know in the comment section if you'd like me to focus on anything else. If there's anything else you'd like to know, anything else you'd like me to make you aware of or introduce you to, please make a comment on that. Okay, so for now, goodbye.